Good evening and welcome to the 21st Annual Exhibit of Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Technology. I have a lot of important guests on the stage to welcome today. We'll be talking about the importance of joint. No, not the green one, but the green gas one. And to talk about this, I'm going to be joined by Bert de Colvenaer, Executive Director of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. Gaelle Hotellie, member of the governing board of the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking, representing the industry, of course, from Siemens. And last but not least, Dr. Sattler, who's representing the new research grouping, but he himself is from the Deutsches Zentrum for Luft und Raumfahrt, one of our favorite customers here. So the importance of joint cooperation. We all know small, medium-sized companies can't do things alone. Even large companies need to integrate their policies and activities European-wide, in fact, globally. But from a European perspective, let's talk about the prominent achievements that the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking has reached over the last few years. Bert?
Just to illustrate, I think the most important achievement we as the Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking have brought forward is really to be a strong, credible and affordable technical platform where research, industry and of course the European Commission as a third partner are meeting on a very regular basis. We have established ourselves as a strong platform just to outline on how this technology on fuel cells and hydrogen is going to evolve over the next years. I think that's one of our main achievements. Of course, with the budget we have received from the European Commission under the 7th framework and now also under Horizon 2020, we do step-by-step technical progress on the different elements of fuel cell operation and hydrogen production. So we do this from a technical perspective, including also demonstration activities. And I think all the people here and all the different stands, to the bigger or smaller extent, do know our organization and do get some funding. But I think the most important is just this platform where people can meet and talk.
Of course, I always say we don't know enough about these technologies. Everyone knows what a fuel cell is these days. They know that they're hydrogen cars. We don't know enough about the policies. So one term you used here, Horizon 2020, we need to know more about it. What is Horizon 2020?
Horizon 2020 is the multi-annual research program of the European Commission. We are one of the elements under the big umbrella. The total budget foreseen from 2014 to 2020 for this Horizon 2020 program is close to 70 billion euro. Yeah? We do have a small part of it where we need to support the fuel cell and hydrogen activities.
Gaelle, you're from two fields, basically. You are as a member of the Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Undertaking. You represent them, and at the same time you're from Siemens. Perhaps you could tell us what the industry specifically expects from this joint undertaking. What expectations do they have?
Yeah, as a member of the joint undertaking of the new IG, so the industry grouping, but also as a member of the board, I think it's very important that all partners that are on the platform of the new IG, of industry grouping, we're trying to join forces together with the Commission and also together with the research groups to try to bring this whole industry with all its different aspects of the industry, with all the different players of the industry to a certain maturity, to a certain level. And it means cooperating, especially for defining together the framework in which we want to work in the future. So it's quite important, although we love competition and we always asking that competition is in place, nevertheless we sometimes have to join forces to make sure that the framework that is in place it's supportive or changed.
Some of the slow aspects of this field are really difficult to understand. For instance, when we first tried to operate a fuel cell way back in the 90s, we discovered that there were no legislations involved. Can you operate it indoors? Even though they're perfectly safe, there just wasn't a law. There are several examples I could give, standardization for fueling. That is, the industry needs to have the European Commission play a role. What does the industry expect from the European Commission? What forms of activities would help us to implement this technology?
Yeah. So we need to be careful. The topics you just addressed are linked to standards and norms. There are other bodies that are responsible for that, where the industry, of course, is involved and play a role, the different players for their expertise. But our expectation towards the joint approach is that we together can place the requirement and say those topics need to be tackled, those frameworks need to be adapted, and that the Commission takes ownership of those topics and implement them when, for example, directives are at discussion or when new legislation are being drafted, that the topic of hydrogen and fuel cells which we represent at the industry level, that those topics are being placed, and also that we have a dialogue. That will be very important.
Christian, you're of course involved in Deutsche Luft and Raumfahrt. You are the specialist for the technical application of this technology on the panel for today, at least. I'd like to ask you, what forms of research do we still perform in order to implement this technology more quickly?
Well, I think implementing is what we would like to achieve within the FCHJU, and this is why we work so closely together in this field, where we now narrow down over the last 10 years the developments into a level where we think that market introduction is very close, and in some fields we already have achieved it. So this is exactly what we would like to do, or what we are doing in the FCHJU. Concerning the question what is necessary in research, it's much more than what we can cover by the FCHJU. There we have clear targets. We would like to get the technologies in the market. But what we need is, of course, to look beyond the time of 2020. So what is necessary after the end of this second FCHJU? And we very much appreciate the discussion here with the industry on what they believe is necessary. And of course, we also need the ideas and the excellence of the researchers that are combined in the Energy Association, that is the member of the FCHJU. And there are more than 60 research centers all over Europe come together with all the expertise there, and this we bring in, and this what helps us to make this joint discussion.
Mm-hmm. One of the interesting concepts I discovered when preparing for this interview was the notion of technology readiness level. We've been talking about being ready for quite some time, but there's actually now a more, let's say, studied way to approach the subject. What is the technology readiness level from your perspective, and what does it imply?
So the technology readiness levels are defined. There are, even for the Horizon 2020, there is a definition by the European Commission on each of the 9 levels. And what we decided for the FCHJU is that we don't work in the basic field, so nothing which is only in the brain of the researcher, but only what is already demonstrated, at least in a lab, is part of the topics of the FCHJU. But of course, we need to do the other work, which is very challenging, which is very important for longer term developments. And these are the technology readiness levels 1, 2, and 3, where we want to use our joint work in the FCHJU to go outside this undertaking and go to other programs and do the work there and help industry to get hands on this technology after 2020.
Mm-hmm. Of course, behind all this there are concrete examples, and just to clarify and make more vivid for the people listening what exactly you do, it always has to have a concrete example. We know you're involved in aeronautical products and so on. Siemens has its projects as well. Let's start perhaps on this side of the board with the interesting question of simple legislation. You have to coordinate what policy changes may come, environmental policies, with the applications of these technologies. Can we be concrete and describe precisely one example of where the joint undertaking is well informed in advance of changes that are coming, which will affect the industry and the implementation of those technologies?
We can use as a very clear and concrete example the Clean Power for Transport Directive, where the European Commission has said, well, we have to find other ways than the normal diesel and gasoline to to fuel the cars. We have to look at natural gas, at electricity and hydrogen. And that's where the joint undertaking, finds his greatest opportunity at the moment, because this gives us the mandate to roll out, for the transport sector, the infrastructure. Because the directive is there, which will be translated in national law, meaning that the countries who adopt this one will have to have a certain size, a certain distribution of hydrogen refilling stations. I think this is the concrete example for us. There are other ones which are probably more technical, the Clean Fuel Directive and so on. There are other ones, but yes, I'm very convinced that it doesn't make any sense that you spend a lot of money to develop a new technology, which is then afterwards not complemented by an applying policy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the business as usual, the conventional technologies will never go out. So we need to force in a certain way or stimulate the actual user to adapt these new technologies.
And from a technology perspective, of course, the worst thing that can happen in a developing industry is where everyone reinvents the wheel. They're all doing the same thing, integrating what developments are underway right now between various industries seems to be very important. I should add to this question also that people are sharing a lot more information now. 10 years ago, we couldn't get any information about the lifespans of their cells, what catalysts they use. Now, people are writing it down. The price lists are there. But how important is it for you to see that the industries themselves are cooperating?
Well, the important point is that, of course, we are only working with a certain pool of members. So we always encourage a lot more companies at different maturity level to join the new IG, the industry grouping, to raise their voice. So we are able to include their concerns, their topics, and their requirement into all of our activities as an industry group. What's quite important is, of course, as you mentioned, we have made a lot of progress between the last GTI 1. We are now in a joint technological innovation program 2, and we are right now in the process of gaining more transparency about on the project that have been financed in the past, together with the project office, to make more transparency on what has been achieved, to demonstrate how much of an achievement we already are able to show. Now, of course, you cannot oblige anyone to do anything, and it's always a cooperative approach. So we are confident, nevertheless, that all of our members in the industry grouping are also interested in demonstrating and documenting how far they are, how fast they're moving. So what we work on as an industry grouping is to create the tools, to create the framework, work on common KPIs. When we define together, all discuss together with the Commission and the research group, what are the topics we want to have in the calls in the coming years. And in those kind of activities, you can also create transparency.
Absolutely, I can underline this, that these joint definition on the topics are so important, because we all together can judge what is the next and most efficient step to get the technologies to the next readiness level. And this can accelerate our developments even more, and we see this already in the discussions taking place in the FCHJU, how well this different bodies work together and how well they adjusted to each other, so that we really say, yes, this is a strong way to get into the products, into the applications.
If I may just complement with one more aspect on the joint. The joint undertaking is there, of course, to group research and industry and European Commission, but I also believe that it's part of our mission to integrate the different European member states, because each of the countries, like Germany for instance, have their national research program, which does not easily allow to work with a French company, a Spanish company or a UK company. Yeah? The European program does that. Now there is even another aspect. We have a budget, the budget of the Horizon 2020, small part, 650 million over the 7 years, which is a nice amount of money, but is probably by far not enough to go to where we would like to be, the full rollout of the fuel hydrogen stations, for instance. Now, joining is also other financial resources. So we are there, and it is written in our mandate, that we should try to find synergies with other European funding instruments. And for some of you who are aware, we're starting to work much closer together with the DG Move, that's the Transport DG, the TEN-T program, which is allowing the trans-European roads through Europe. So that's one program we're trying to join this kind of funding, but also the European Structural and Investment Funds. It's another big pot of money where this is basically allocated to work out, to improve the infrastructure, roads. So there also are for us opportunities to find funding to allow for deployment of hydrogen stations or for buses or something which is in the common for the European citizen. So there are different aspects on the word join.
Mm-hmm. I should add that we do have time for a question from the audience if there are any questions. I'm sure our members would be happy to ask. I certainly have a few final questions. We're on the last 2 minutes or 3 minutes, but still there's this fascination with what really is going to come. I have been following Deutsche Luft and Raumfahrt for over 15 years here with their various contributions. Some have come out big and then disappeared. Others have come out small and proved to be the most vital. So if you were to look into your crystal ball and tell us by 2020 or by 2025, in the next 10 years, what you expect to be really marketed well-rooted in the economy, what would be your products?
Well, 2020 for a researcher is quite close, so we rely on in a time frame on 2020 on our colleagues from industry. That's their business. That's where we support them. If you have asked me to 2025 or 2030, this is more our business to work on that developments. And there we see innovative technologies to produce hydrogen from renewables. We see even more effective electrolyzer systems, maybe diverse electrolyzer systems, and all such technologies are on the way to support the introduction of hydrogen in fuel cells.
It's always a difficult thing when you look back what happened in the last 5 years, and that's the time frame we're talking about. I don't think that 5 years ago anyone would have put a bet on what today you have on the market. You have on quite a lot of members of the new IG grouping have reached a TRL 1 or 2 on certain technologies, and the next technologies are moving in. So I think there is a remaining challenge in the next 5 years. High influence will have the framework, the legislation framework on specific topics, but I think we will see really the demonstration in the life of the people at home, in the cars, in the industrial process, that hydrogen and fuel cells technology are available and have a business case.
Mm-hmm. We'll obviously have to continue this discussion outside of this forum because there's so much to talk about, European policies, the role of the environment, changing policies, and how this affects implementations of technologies. It's an endless field, but it's incredibly important. And for that reason, I am very grateful that, Bert, you've come back this year, as last year and the year before, and that we've sat at the stage. This is Bert de Colvenaer, Executive Director of Fuel Cells and Hydrogen Joint Undertaking. I was joined also with Gaelle, Hotellie, member of the governing board of that organization, and at the same time from Siemens, and Dr. Christian Sattler, who's representing the new research grouping within that organization, but also from Deutsches, Zentrum für Luft und Raumfahrt. Thank you all. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Hope to see you again next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again for being here for our talk. We'll be up in 1 minute. Our next topic on stage will be the docks. Inogen, CHP product tailored to the customer. And we'll be talking to the Baxi representative, Philip Klose. Thank you for the card.